My name is David Hart. I'm the director of the Mitchell Center. It's great to have you here. I'm going to do a few announcements of things that are coming up, and then I'm going to introduce our speaker. It's just cool to see a mix of folks in the room. A great thing is going to happen at the Civic Center in about a month, which is the Sustainability and Water Conference. John Banks is the keynote from the Penobscot Nation. This is a talk next week, totally different than this one, equally cool. So you're going to want to be here for that too. Or find a friend to come if you can't make it. In a second, I will also be pointing to the fact that there are abstracts, that deadline for abstracts to submit for the Sustainability and Water Conference. That's something we encourage you to do. The deadline is March 5th, which is what, like a week from Thursday or something? So there, that. So please go for it. And yeah, and then the talk after Carly's next week on ticks is from Abe Miller-Rushing from Acadia National Park, talking about kind of what role science could play in addressing management challenges in the park, probably both people challenges and ecosystem challenges. So that should be really good as well. Okay, so I think maybe I'll switch slides and then tell you a little bit about our speaker. So we welcome Ted Koffman to the Mitchell Center. This is by no means his first time, as you'll find out soon, but we're lucky that the state of New Jersey loaned him to us for pretty much the rest of his life. Some of his first visits here were around the age of 10, and when he was visiting as a kid, Moosehead Lake, including seeing kind of some of the last of the log drives down the Kennebec, the Penobscot. Pretty different time in Maine. Pretty interesting to learn about. And I don't know exactly how he got his start in the Maine woods in addition to that, but eventually he became sort of a regular paddling down the Allagash more than 50 times. I've only been once. I'm incredibly envious, but I'm pretty sure as a river scientist, which I am, that he will soon be inducted into the Fluvial Hall of Fame. If you don't know river jargon, go look it up. He, for more than 30 years, was at the College of the Atlantic down on MDI, and you'll see that he's got deep roots there as the Director of Government and Community Relations. During the time he was at COA, and I think this is really something pivotal to all the great stuff that Ted brings to his life and work, he created this thing called ECO, ECO-ECO, we'll talk about, Nonpartisan Public Interest Coalition, more than 100 leaders from business, environmental, and state agencies in Maine, discussing the challenges, often the controversies, about policy issues related to the future of the environment and the economy. Well, guess what sustainability is about? And guess where we got a lot of our ideas? I'll come back to that point too. I found a really cool quote from one of the editors or founders of a really amazing newspaper that's no longer in Maine, the Maine Times, that said, Ted developed ECO into the closest thing Maine had to an effective, nonpartisan think tank. I just came back from Washington, where it's a city that's crushed with think tanks, not nearly as good as the kind that Maine had under Ted's leadership. Out of that, he did other work with the Department of Environmental Protection called the Maine Environmental Priorities Project, 37-member steering committee looking at environmental issues in Maine. He then served in the House of Representatives in Maine from 2000 to 2008, doing a ton of things. Formed and chaired the Community Preservation Advisory Committee, which really led to a lot of the smart growth development policies in Maine. A little bit away from that, he championed migratory shorebird protection measures, historic building renovation incentives, electronic waste recycling legislation, and sponsored the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative that is a model in the country for how we're going to have to confront the problem of greenhouse gas mitigation. I thought I knew a lot about Ted, but I didn't know that there was a really cool article that featured him in The Nation back in 2003, when it was, I don't know if anybody listened to the State of the State address by Governor Mills, but one of the recurring lines was, "We're not Washington, we're Maine." And the point was, sometimes Washington gets kind of stuck, and I mean no respect to Senator Mitchell, who spent a lot of his life there and did great work, but sometimes they get stuck, I'll just put it that way. And in Maine, sometimes and in some other states, I think policy innovation is happening early on that can spread. And here's what I used to think that, but I didn't know what Ted thought until I was reading. Here's his quote in this story in The Nation. "We can't wait for Washington. Washington isn't going to save us on the issues we care about, at least not anytime soon." By the way, this was in 2003, so it's kind of prescient. This is where the action is in Maine. He was a legislator at the time, and this is where we are going to have to come up with ideas that eventually will make their way onto the national agenda. And I can tell you that some of the work that goes on in the Mitchell Center is making its way out to the national agenda, even in the way that higher education reform is occurring, which is kind of exciting. So many of the ideas that we're practicing, the core values at the Mitchell Center, bringing diverse groups together, addressing challenges that involve both people and nature, were inspired by Ted, and in particular the eco work. I was just talking with him about when I first heard about that. It was very formative. We were very lucky that then Ted served on our science advisory board for 5 years when we had something called the Sustainability Solutions Initiative. It was supported by a $20 million grant from the National Science Foundation, and it led to the creation of the Mitchell Center as it currently stands. During that same time, he was the executive director of Maine Audubon from about 2009 to 2014. And it occurred to me, so I know enough, I'm trained as a biologist and an ecologist, so in that world, and in the world of Audubon, we worry a lot about imperiled species and imperiled habitats. But I was listening to Ted, who is also now on the Mitchell Center Advisory Board, talk about affordable housing, and I thought, wow, if we care about critical habitat for birds and other wildlife, shouldn't we also care about critical habitat for people? And I have to say that in my own training, that isn't exactly what we were supposed to think about. Everything but people is what we were supposed to think about, all the other species. So that's what this is about. I didn't try real hard to find out Ted's middle name, but I've decided that I believe it should be community. There's almost nothing in the way of community engagement that he hasn't done. I did not know he was the former captain of the Southwest Harbor Fire Department. And but as you'll see, he's also on the board of Island Housing Trust, and that's what his story is about today. So please join me in welcoming Ted Koffman to the Mitchell Center.
Well, thank you very much, David, for inviting me in the first place, and for your generous introduction. And also to Ruth Halsworth. I know she's not here, but I'd like her to know.
There she is, back in the corner.
There she is. Thank you so much. Yeah, she's a great editor.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm happy to be here. My son and daughter Bess and son Toby, earned their PhDs at the Climate Change Institute 4 or 5 years ago. And she's gone on to Colby in the Environment and Climate Change Department at Colby. And my son is in Montana working in a laboratory in Bozeman.
Wow.
So it's a long way away. I have a granddaughter who's 5 years old, turned 5 years old yesterday. So it's going to be hard. Of course, it's good fishing out there, so I'll have a good excuse. Well, happy to be here. My remarks about affordable housing come from my years of service on the board of directors of the Island Housing Trust. I was there when we founded it in 2000 or 2002. And so I learn a lot from others, but I don't consider myself an expert. I'm not writing any books about this. And about my history, I've been very lucky to have a lot of good experiences in my career and work and activities, and I feel very grateful for it. It's mostly because the relationships I had with others, people I met, and you might share certain values or certain goals, and if you start to have 3 or 4 or 10 or 12, you start doing things together and getting things done and supporting each other. But I never felt myself as particularly a leader, but if anything, I was sort of a choir director. Because the people I was surrounded with were very smart, very capable business people and environmental leaders, etc. And so I'm glad to have had that time. So I'm doing a PowerPoint. How many of you have done a PowerPoint? Well, this is my first one. This is my first PowerPoint. Yes, this is my first one.
I haven't done one yet at all, so you're ahead of me.
Well, we can work on this together. If you want to do the clicker, you could do that. Anyway, and it's got one of these things. I live right around there. See, I'm shaking because I'm scared. Anyway.
Aren't there earthquakes down on?
We did have an earthquake about
That's what's going on.
4 or 5 years ago. Yep. My chimney almost fell down. So I have my PowerPoint. We're going to walk through that. I'll try and add elements to it as we go from one slide to another. I hope I can get through them quickly enough. You think, Ruth, I can get through them quickly enough? You could have one of these signs if you think I'm going too much time, or people will be leaving sooner than I'd hoped. The Island Housing Trust actually came out of another kind of activity called MDI, Mount Desert Island, Tomorrow, Shaping the Future. And it was 20 years ago, and it was started with, this is another example of bringing people together, local civic leaders in the communities. There are 4 municipalities in 9 villages on Mount Desert Island. And the leaders in the island in different works of life came together to say, things are changing on this island. We're starting to lose population. What's going on? And what are the needs that we have that we're not taking care of, like transportation, public transportation, that sort of thing. So they came together and we started having meetings. I think there were 150 meetings, 3 conferences. We had a mail list of 350 people that could follow our activities and whatnot, and ended up with at the very end, Shaping Our Future, and it has all the reports on the different activities, including affordable housing, and that's how I really got involved locally. But they also were working on community design and land use, economic prosperity, year-round storefronts and co-ops, and bicycles and safety access on bicycles, community health, community children. Have you all been to the island, to Acadia? How many hands for Acadia? I just want to see. Oh, yeah, great. Well, I'll show you where I live. If you ever want to get coffee or something, drop by. Yeah. So, where was I? So I can't remember where I was. But so we did this study, and the Island Explorer. The Explorer, the bus system, that came out of this. We talked about we needed to do something and have fewer cars running around on the roads all through the island. So the Explorer came up, and that was a fantastic investment, and it's been working beautifully. We had a kids' corner, so-called, a child care area. It was desperately needed for people who are working and have kids, and it's a beautiful facility and great place for my my niece. And what else? Well, we did Island Connections. So we have a lot of older people, like any other community, who may not drive anymore, but it's not an urban center where you can grab a cab, and people get isolated and need to get to the doctor or need to get whatever. And so we created this organization called Connections, Island Connections, and volunteer drivers will go out and get help people and get them to their hospital or dentist or shopping or whatever they need to do. So, it enriched the island and life in the island, and made people's lives going a little bit better than they had been. So here we go. Are you ready? Take a deep breath. Boom. Oh, that's cartoon. Can you read that? It says a lot about what's going on in real estate on any place along the coast. When I talk about the island, MDI, it's only one piece of change that's going on and challenges for housing all the way down the coast. Anywhere near the water, it's expensive to get, as you probably know, to get an apartment or a house, and so that's what this is about. Just coincidentally, yesterday, before I flip into another slide, I was asked to help facilitate a community visioning activity, much like MDI tomorrow, in Northeast Harbor. But the town of Mount Desert is bigger than Northeast Harbor, as you probably all know. And they wanted to look at issues that they thought they needed to deal with and what have you, including housing. So yesterday I spent the afternoon with a group of other facilitators, not that I'm a professional, but I do it sometimes. And the discussion was around, what do you like about the town of Mount Desert? What kinds of issues do we need to deal with? And what would you like the future to be like? And the top priorities after 2 hours of discussions around tables and what have you, and there were probably 60 people, about more than this group. The top priorities were affordable housing, to support ordinances to allow more density that's one of our biggest problems. We got to the habit of thinking if you're going to build a house in rural Maine or anywhere in Maine, you ought to have 2 acres or 3 acres or 5 acres to put a house on it. And you really don't need that. You don't need that kind of space to get a house, especially if you have sewer and water systems. You can build more densely. And when you're in Bar Harbor, I gotta go back to Bar Harbor. Oh, I'm going that way from Bar Harbor. There we go. So the park is 47,000 acres, the green, obviously. And you can see Bar Harbor is kind of hugged with this park land. We love the park. It's a key for our economy in many respects. But if you've been to Bar Harbor, you know that there's, grids of streets and up and down, and there's not a lot of room to do more building, to stretch out. So like toothpaste, you squeeze and you go up Route 3, that's the squeeze, up through here, and this is part of Bar Harbor as well. But when you're trying to do something for affordable housing, most people would rather be close to town. They'd like to have. How many of you walked to school when you were a kid? Any of you? It's getting fewer and fewer. I used to ask this 20 years ago, and when we're doing smart growth, and almost everybody put their hand up because they were walking to school. But now you're taking your school bus, usually, right? That sort of thing. Anyway, people would prefer to have their kids be able to walk to the school or walk home. And you can do that if you're right in Bar Harbor where the elementary school is. So, let's see if we can see. Oh, so here I was in Northeast Harbor, and the town manager is Derlin Lunt. Derlin Lunt is, I think, 80 maybe. He's the town manager. He's lived there all his life. He's a very smart guy, very, very smart, and a good sense of humor. But he loves his town. And I talked with him before we had our session just to get his sense of things. And he was saying to me that he was seeing year to year fewer and fewer people living, homes and families in the town of Northeast Harbor. the immediate town of Northeast Harbor. There were 750 people there, 20 people, 750 people, about 15 years ago. And he began to see that these folks who were year-round homes and families going to their schools, they were evaporating. And that one of the problems with this sort of thing is it is like evaporating. It's like glacials. They go slowly, but they go. And so, you start to lose the population. And he told me, Ted, we're down to 350 people now. From 750 to 300, that's a big change. And it affects the economy of the village and all other aspects, the civic life of, people who are going to be in the town council, and how's the school going. And one of the things that we talked about yesterday, they were worried about, one of the things they didn't want to lose was their elementary school. They have a wonderful elementary school. But it's challenged because, as I'll show you in one of the charts here, they're losing enrollment, and that's a problem. And as one person said, if the schools go, so go the community. And that's true for almost any town or community. School is sort of the heart of the town. A lot of things happen at the school, not just teaching. So anyway, so that was something that they're really concerned, and I'm going to show you eventually. So some data about why we're having a problem. Why don't we have enough people living on the island who work on the island? So we have 5,200 jobs, year-round jobs. We have 4,000 summer seasonal jobs. That's a whole other issue. When you have 4,000 people come on the island to work at the hotels and restaurants for 12 or 14 weeks or whatever, where are they going to live? So they're competing with the year-round people who also need to get apartments and things like that. But anyway, so we wonder, well, where are all these workers if they can't find housing? Because half of the people, 60% of the workers on the island are commuting off the island in the afternoon after the workday. When I was in the legislature, I would get up and get ready to go to Augusta at 6:30 in the morning and drive to the head of the island. Whoop, where's my island? Yeah. So I'd be up, going off right here, you've been through here, and I'd get to that spot and I would start counting cars, as I drove all the way to Ellsworth, which isn't very far, 19, 20 miles. And I'd usually get a count. I didn't do it every day, every week that I went to Augusta, but every Monday tried to remember. And it was 250 cars at 6:30 in the morning, not bumper to bumper, but a lot of cars. No going with me out, but all those were coming onto the island. And I didn't get the clue. I didn't figure that out. That's what's going on. If they're coming on, they must have to be coming off. And oftentimes I wasn't leaving the island when everybody's leaving. But especially in the summer, when we have so much summer traffic, people who have moved to Lemoyne and Trenton and Ellsworth, and we have workers who go to homes in 4 counties surrounding, including Hancock County, to get a house, get a place to live, a rent to live. And then they commute all the way to the Jackson Lab, for example, which is the largest in employment, 1,400 people. But lots of other positions, they come all the way to the island. I have a friend who told me the other day that he lives on Route 3 right there, and he has a job at the college, and then he has a periodic evening job in Ellsworth for some extra money. And he said in the summer, when the traffic is coming off the island with tourists, they're always flowing, it takes 2 hours sometimes for him to get to Ellsworth. Can you imagine? And I met a woman at the hospital who told me that she had a kid and lived in Brewer, and it would take her over 2 hours to get to Brewer for her kids. So that's a cost. That's a kind of price that you get for having a limited housing options close to where you work. So here we go. Go some more. Go there. 84% of the homes that are sold are not affordable to people who earn the income that's necessary to own a house. You can't, we have median affordable price $185,000. Well, we don't have houses that sell at $185,000. We did 20 years ago, but now you probably get into 220, 230, and then up. Well, you know, you need to have a good deal more money than $53,000. So that's one of the reasons so many people are going off island. And we'd like more of them to come back. I was thinking to myself in a poetry kind of way that at the end of the workday, 3:30 for a lot of them, they start work sometimes at 6:30 or even earlier. And so from 3:30 to 5:30, the traffic's coming off the island in a real bumper-to-bumper stream. And I think about them as sort of a resource of talent and skills and all kinds of qualities that you could bring to a town. They're leaving our town. They used to 30 years ago on the island. Most everybody did. Not always, but you know. And so here we are, you see this flow like a river of humanity, of qualities, and and of course they're doing their jobs at the boat shop, or they're working at the lab, and they're giving that service to the economy and whatnot. But they're leaving to other towns where their kids are going to go to school. They're not going to be going to our schools. We have a good school system. And we often don't get talented workers because they can't live on the island, and they want to be on the island, and their kids go to the best school, and they want their kids to be fairly close. So you know, if you're a 6-year-old and it's kindergarten or whatever, 6-year-old, do you go to kindergarten? I guess so. No. 7? No. 4, 5. Okay. So your 5-year-old, you know, is having an upset stomach, and you're working at the Jackson lab, and you can go to the elementary school in about 4 minutes and get your daughter and get her to home. So many of the people who work on the island, who live off the island, their kids are going to school and, you know, dropped off in the school with a bus, and you know, how could you feel if your child was feeling badly, or if there was other issues that you had to deal with, and you had a 2-hour drive to get to them? You know, I would be stunned. I'd be very upset. So it's an issue, and so you know, most of these folks, we did a survey 2 years ago of the employees on the island, and 67% of them would prefer to live on the island if they could, and they just can't. So it's a challenge, and we don't have. When I was you heard I was a captain in the fire department, and whenever we had a fire at night, I would be shaking like that, except in the car, trying to push the pedal on my car because my leg was going, because I was going to be the first one to get the fire department because I was a block away. I said, I hope some more guys get here in time at 2 a.m, get the trucks going, or am I going all by myself? Of course, they all get there, which is about community too. You can really count on everybody, no matter what. They're going to get there if they can. But you're still kind of scared when you're getting there. But I thought to myself, when we saw that the year-round employees living on the island, when we saw that evaporation, first thing I thought of was being a volunteer fire department. So I went, a couple of years ago, I talked to the chiefs and some of the departments on the island. They were all struggling to get volunteers. No, that's not very good. What you were talking about caring about and the environment and animals and wildlife, and then there's people. What about people? And we have to raise money to help get homes. The way we do that partly is if a family can get, they find a home that may be more than they can afford, or they might be able to pay a mortgage to get in that home, but they don't have the down payment. That might be 25 or 30 or 40,000 to get into the house. And we raise money to help those families get that step into the house. Now we need about 400 units on the island, and we've done 41 so far. We're in the midst of building another 8 houses or 10 houses in a development I'll show you. But we need to raise money. We talk to people about the summer people particularly, because that's where you're going to get your dough. And they're so keen about protecting the park and the beautiful environment, and they come up from Philadelphia and Washington and New York and St. Louis. They love it. We all do, right? We all do. But they'll give money to protect the park or protect the surroundings or buy land that might screw their view up a little bit. If something's going to build across the harbor there, I don't want that. Let's go buy that piece of lot so we can keep our view. And I'm not cynical about it, but it really is interesting how hard it is to get them to conserve the community. You can conserve the natural environment, but what about the community? And if you're having a heart attack and there's no ambulance coming, or you have a fire and the truck's not going to get there in time, that's a problem. And so we have to really educate the summer folks as to what we need to do in terms of getting people back on the. And most people understand it, but it's an issue. So I already talked about that, didn't I? Well, there are also the issue of commuters facing to, they have higher costs, and that means that their employer is probably going to have to pay them more because they're driving and whatnot. It's more expensive to go to work. And I talked about the bumper and bumper stuff. And then there is issues about the environment in terms of sprawl and producing more CO2 from driving so much. So, and I also mentioned that employers have a hard time recruiting good workers when those workers can't get housing. I'm not going to go through all of this thing, but there is the school. And you can see enrollments have been dropping, and that's not so far away, right, over the last 10 years. That's worrisome. So they're starting to talk about, well, maybe we need to consolidate more busing, more this and more that. And we're going to be a real hard effort to make sure we get enrollments back up again, get more people living on the island who used to live on the island. But over here, what happened here at Mount Desert Elementary School? We built a 10-house development in Mount Desert, and I'm going to show you this. But so you see that there was growth here, right, for them. Well, you already know that we do this, so I'm not going to do this. And we build neighborhoods, and let's see, we provide bridging, I mentioned that. And we do solicit land. People will give us land to build on, and they'll even give us houses occasionally. We're trying to do more of that, though. So I mentioned we had 41 homes that we've done so far, and since 2011, we've spent $400,000 that's been donated to help people get into those homes. Now, there's nothing nicer than to see those families in loving being on the island. I won't get into this very far, but we're producing a kind of hybrid or unconventional housing market. The market as it is you want to make as much money building houses and selling them to people who can afford it. So most of the building going on the island is higher end than any worker on the island, probably, except the bank president or something. So we are helping people getting in and giving money to them to get into their houses, but there's a covenant with the deal, and that's the covenant, the affordability covenant. And that we help you get the home, but we own the land. It's land trusts and house and land trusts. We hold the land, and we have a covenant. We have, as an organization, if someone wants to sell their home, they have to be willing to sell their house a little bit higher than what they paid for, because over time the value of the house goes up, and you get that for it. And you can actually get some changes to the house, maybe another bathroom or something. But you can't build a garage, a swimming pool, because that house isn't going to be sold at a level that people can appreciate. So the covenant it's well understood to the people we work with, that, okay, I get a house in a nice neighborhood, and it's a well-built house, insulated well and everything else. But no, you can't flip it 2 years later for another $200,000 more, which happens all the time. There was a story. How are we doing on time? We're doing okay. I'm almost done, kind of. And there may be questions too, right? But getting back to my friend in Northeast Harbor, Mr. Lunt. Mr. Lunt was at my table. There were 8 people at my table, and the other fellow on the other side of the table is a native. In fact, his family moved into Northeast Harbor in 1798. He's pretty proud about. He kinds of sense of ownership of the place. Of course, he's a town councilman and such. And so we were talking about the loss of housing, and this other fellow said, Buddy's 90 years old. He's a town councilor and owns a local store, and he's been there forever. Nice, smart guy. And he says, Buddy, we're all looking back and forth. You remember when it started? But Buddy looked kind of blushing, because it's a community. You don't want any gossip to get. He said, well, what do you mean? He said, you know who sold his house, and then everything started happening. Well, it was like 20 years ago. This fellow built a house on a little lot in town, and it was a two-bedroom, one-story, simple house. He was building it himself. He spent $40,000 building it. About 9 months later, the summer came, and some summer folks came over and said, we'll give you $250,000 for that house. $250,000. He took the $250,000, and he went to Trenton, maybe 10 miles away, and he built the same darn house for $40,000 and retired. Now, it hit me when I heard this, because I think about the companies that buy houses in town. Imagine those streets that you've walked on, and they were all homes for people who worked and lived there year round. Over time, outfits will, out of state or even in state, will buy some of those houses for B&Bs. They don't live there, they're not in the town, but they own the property. And they'll have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of them. And so we're working on that, actually. We'd like people to be able to rent a room or rent a house. But if you're the owner and you either live in the town, but you normally wouldn't live in the town, but for a month you're going to rent it so you can pay your mortgage, or you can do something, get some money. And that's been done for over 150 years. People would give rent a room to get a little extra income. But it's another matter when you have out of town folks buying houses, aren't paying really attention to what's going on, who's going in and out of their places in people's residential neighborhoods, the parties, the this, the that, and the other thing. And you have summer people now, so-called seasonal people, who are fine, but they're coming in and buying houses that they never would have bought 30 years ago. But now they'll buy them and either tear them down and put another house on the lot, or put a lot of money into the house. But they're not going to be there in the winter. So as the town manager of Bar Harbor told me the other day, he said, I walk down at night and every other house is dark. And they used to be all lit up. So it's a thinning of the fabric of the community, essentially. But that's the way it goes. Oh, it's a family. That looks like a happy family. This is, remember I said we get houses? Well, we got that one, didn't we? And we didn't get caught. No, it's this house went about a mile away. It was a kind of a studio for a very wealthy woman. And she said, well, I don't need this anymore. You can have it. So it got onto a trailer, and it's winter, and all these wires had to be put up. It took forever. And so there was a lot of money going in just to move it to the lot. And then she paid for the foundation to put it on. The lot itself was donated by the town of Mount Desert, and so they're all for that. They're happy. But it was fun watching it come down the road. And we even had one of those things that go with the camera. Drone. It's really cool watching this house coming down from up tall. This house is in Northeast Harbor. 2 years ago, we bought it. It was in really bad shape, not almost livable anymore. You wouldn't think it now. It's nice and neat. Inside and outside, it's all done. We raised the money for it, and the woman she could walk to the fire department and the ambulance, and she's an EMT, very loved by the community, very good professional. She's got a teenage son, shares the house with her, and she's very happy to be there. And that's, one piece and another, building back to the community. Oh, let's not do this. Well, it's 3:45. So you know what you can do? I can give you my PowerPoint, right? Because Ruth would be happy to know. I'll give you my email or something. Yeah. This is our neighborhood. We built this 10 years ago. We put in the road. We put the blasting to build the foundation. We couldn't even give a full cellar. So you have to get down like this underneath. But you can still get your canoe in there and keep your bikes in there and that sort of thing. They're happy to have the places. It's a very nice neighborhood, not far from the center of Soamesville. And we have enough, and that land was given by Rockefeller, the Rockefeller family, about 50 years ago, and it was just dormant. And then we were created in 2000, and we had to raise $1 million to get a road all in through, and the town put in sewer, so it had sewer and all that. Blasting, we drilled wells, and some wells were just normal wells, and some of them were gushers. I'd never seen water shoot up like that. So, we could have had a big swimming pool or something. So here's a gathering of folks, and some of those little people are going to that elementary school that got the enrollment back up. Well, we have like 4 families with a bunch of kids, and that's what we're looking for. Not always have to have kids, but it's good to have them. Then they have such a good time. One of the people living in that neighborhood got permission to build a separate building for his oven, and his old dog bread. Old dog. Great bread. And he had a lot of varieties, and he's been very successful. He even goes to Ellsworth because people like it so much. It's good. So we collaborate. I mean, that's essential, always to be working with other organizations and trying to get things done. And the Maine Coast Heritage Trust, they're in a land trust trying to protect islands and coastal areas and magnificent work. But in this case, they helped us buy 17 acres. And it cost $100,000, and they helped us get the money to do that. That's 17 acres. And it's near a swamp. Ah, I've got it back. Come back, come back. There you are. So this is a huge wetland. Obviously, you can't get yourself into that wetland. It's protected. And over here is the bay, one of the part of the bay. So it's a pretty cool, but as much as I'm happy with it, and we're working on it, and this is the pattern of the housing that'll be there on that property. We're going to try and get solar on all their roofs if we can find a way to do it. But still in all, it's probably 12 to 15 minutes to get to school by a vehicle. The kid isn't going to ride a bike, not on that road, Route 3. So, you do what you can do, In Ellsworth, we get to Ellsworth once in a while, and there's a Shaw's grocery store. And there's this fellow named Kevin Bunker, who's a good friend of Evan Rickards. Really bright guy. He's in his 40s, I guess. He does a lot of work around the state. But tax increment funding is a tool to bring businesses into a community. You don't have to pay taxes for the property. You can turn that money into your project as a way of an incentive for whatever business. When I was in the legislature, I chaired this committee, and my co-chair was Peter Mills, who's Janet Mills's brother. Janet, she's our governor. And Peter, that's a very smart family. They're genius. They're going to be spreading them because they're so smart. But he's a lawyer, and he was on my committee. He was the co-chair. And he said, why don't we do tips for affordable housing? We've been doing it for business. Why don't he said, let's turn the law right up on top and help people get into houses. And he wrote the whole law, and then we all lobbied it in the legislature to get it passed, and we did get it passed. We've had, from that incentive for developers up and down the coast, 2,200 units have been developed so far. 2,200 homes for people. And this, in this case, is right in Ellsworth. You can literally walk to the grocery store. It's right behind them. And they're going to build another 50 units this next year. And Jackson Lab is said that they're actually working with this same company. They're going to build 100 units right behind the Jackson Lab facilities. So there's 100 employees. So think about, all the kids and families that are going to, the resource I was talking about is going off the island. You can't begrudge all those other communities that get our workers living in their communities and paying taxes in their communities. But now we're rebuilding our own community, and it's going to make a big difference. When I come back again, you'll all be out you'll be graduate school or something. But I'm thinking those bars are going to change, and we're going to have growth back up, at least up to what we had, and even more over the next 5 years. And then one of my favorite projects, when I was in legislature and worked with a team of people again, real smart folks, there is in the world things called historic tax credits. And we had a program for that here in Maine, but it was really kind of anemic. It wasn't doing anything. It wasn't enough of an incentive to do anything with it. So we talked to experts, we being a big group of people doing the homework, to talk to experts, what would be the perfect historic tax credit program. And we got that. But what they do with the tax credits is you can get tax credits for 25% of the cost of renewal a facility like this. We have so many mills from Biddeford, and Saco, and Lewiston, and Waterville. In fact, this is the Waterville one, which is actually all of this, and then this little one over here. That's all 132 market rate workforce apartments right down in town. It's kind of cool. And this is just a business office, but all of that has been rejuvenated, renewed, and it's really fun to be in them, to see those big beams and bricks, and it's very handsome stuff. Oh, we've got 7 minutes. Oh! Okay. Do we have any questions? Thank you. Thanks very much. Yes, ma'am.
In terms of the families that get assistance getting into those more like affordable houses and getting that loan, how do you decide which families get that?
Oh, that's a really good question. And we had to really work hard to figure out what would be a fair process. We have a queue. So when a house is up and open and it's advertised, then people come in with their applications, and because they have to be living in the island, they have to have at least 25% of their primary income has to be earned there. They have to be able to get a bank mortgage. The banks work with us with a lot, the various banks. They care a lot about this too, and they're very generous with them. But so you have a list of, let's say, sometimes we'll have 15 people on that queue, and then we say, okay, so you can have it, and then they may or may not actually go through with it. And we hope to have that kind of problem. We have more queues and more houses to get to for people. But good question.
No questions? As you were saying, obviously some services like first responders and everything important in communities too. So do y'all give people like that any preference whenever y'all see applications?
That's a good question. We have a kind of ethical issue, not following with what's your point, but that you might want to give so and so a house and let them get in the front of the line, and we avoid doing that. That's very helpful. Now I've got something to do with because the town could. In fact, I have to get in front of town council. Town meeting. You ever go to be found town meeting? Talk about nervous. Anyway, I'm supposed to ask them for $2,500 in the budget. But that would be a good idea to get the town council to make sure that people who are doing emergency. I talked to a fellow, my sister-in-law that's right close to the fire department, and I take my little nephew who I've been taking care of since he was a baby. And he likes to go to the fire department. He gets his little red hat and everything, and we talk to the fire truck man and stuff. And I met with one of the guys and talked with him. He's an EMT, and he's a senior member of the team, and all that. And I said, well, Will, where do you live? And he lives north of Ellsworth. How long is your drive? Well, in a good day, 45 minutes. Well, you're not going to get to the fire. Now, they probably have enough staff, obviously, always on staff, but still in all, So that would be good. And then you don't have to make people live on the island, but if they want to be on the island and they're doing that kind of service, yeah. This is true for school teachers too, in a way. Yeah, we want to get them. Any more questions? Yes.
So it seemed like the main target demographic was like families to move into the housing available, because Maine has a very large senior population. Considered senior living and housing.
Right.
Constructing these new developments.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because the house is going to be long for these families.
They can stay in their house. Yeah, I wondered about that and said, well, gee whiz, you've had this house for 40 years and you don't work anymore and now you're retired. Well, it's their house. And then eventually they'll sell it. We have the first option to buy it, but we also control what the price is going to be within the formula that is everybody signed off on, But that's a good point. And we also have more housing for elderly on the island than we do for our workers, and and low income, we have quite a bit of low income, what they call Section 8 support for very low income citizens, and there's quite a few units there. But it's the middle income group that are 60 to 100,000. You know, you can have a couple each getting 40,000. That's not a huge salary to get up to 80,000 or so. But there's not a lot of support and help for people to get into a home who have what we think, I mean, I think is pretty good income to have an 80 or 90,000 income, but not to get houses here. So, and it's not a giveaway, it's they're giving us something to be in our community, whether they're a fireman or they're a teacher or they're a nurse or what have you, just a person, you know. And in terms of governance, you want to have as many people to turn to be on town council or school board or coaches or whatever, you know. The thinner and thinner it gets, the harder it is, and people are less likely to want to live in the community. You don't want to, I used to think we would have a cartoon, I had that cartoon there that said the shacks, right? I was thinking of a cartoon with a gated island. My brother went to North Carolina and he got a house in a gated thing. And I drove up, I thought there were going to be, you know, AR-15s at the time. Gee whiz, you know, big bars come down and all this. And I thought, you know, if we don't get this solved, the summer people and the seasonal people who have a lot of dough will have a gated island. Well, it's of course not going to happen, but that's what it feels. If we don't get to work on this and get it done, and we can get it done. And these units that we're buying for getting people, it's in perpetuity. That contract just keeps working and keeps working. So that's cool. Hey, thank you very much for
Yeah, so
putting me up.